right, continuing on with number 16 here. 16 is an interesting one. And my advice to you is anytime you see something like this, you're going to have to FOIL. And that's what I did up here. Most times you're going to have to FOIL. So when I FOIL it, I get 4ax squared minus 4x plus 4ax minus 4 minus x squared plus 4. And what's nice here is the negative 4 and the 4's cancel. So when they say a is a constant, all that means is a is going to be a number. And they want the value of b. And what we need to recognize is that this can be simplified down here into the ax squared plus bx plus c form. So really what I'm looking to do is, if I want my bx, I want to get rid of my constant, which happens here naturally. Negative 4 and 4 goes away. But I also have to get rid of my x squareds. So I have a negative 1 in front of this x squared right here. What does 4a have to equal so the x squareds get canceled? Well, if 4a equals 1, I'd have 1x squared and negative 1x squared, which cancels. Well, what times 4 will give you 1? Okay, well, what I set up here, okay, is something where this 4a and this negative 1 have to end up being 0. So if I add 1 to both sides and I divide 4 on both sides, I get 1/4. And if you notice that 1/4 times 1/4 is 1. So now I have x squared minus x squared, and they cancel. So now I'm just left with my x's, and the number that, or the coefficient that goes in front of the x represents your b, based off the ax squared plus bx plus c binomial format. So if I plug 1/4 in for a here, I just get 1. So negative 4x plus x is negative 3x. And therefore my answer is negative 3. Down here is a basic systems of equations where I have to get t and w and then just plug them back in. Make sure we answer what we're asking. But they're giving you 2 equations. So I just set up a system. I multiply the top by negative 2, which allows the 4w's to cancel. We're left with negative 3t over, or equals negative 3. Once again, that negative 2 gets distributed to all 3 terms. And now t equals 1. I plug that back into an original. I chose the bottom one, but it doesn't really matter. 5 times 1 is 5. We subtract 5 on both sides, and we divide by 4. My w is 5. So if my w is 5 and t equals 1, 2 times 5 is 10, 3 times 1 is 3, and 10 and 3 is 13. Number 18, really what we need to recognize is really what they're saying there. All right, if p% of an adult's daily allowance of potassium is provided by x servings, whatever percentage that is, we get every serving. So depending on how many servings there are, if I multiply that, I should get my percent. Well, in this question, they tell you that potassium, which we need 180 milligrams of potassium, the 180 is not that important. It's 5% of our daily allowance. Well, if you look here, if p% of an adult daily allowance of potassium is provided in x servings, well, there's 5% in every serving. So in x servings per day, which of the following expresses p in terms of x? If I multiply x by 5, all right, that should give me the amount of percentage of potassium I should get each day. So for example, 1 serving will give me 5%. 2 servings should give me 10%. 3 servings should give me 15%. This is the one equation that would make that true. Number 19 is probably one of the harder problems out there. The reason why I think it's difficult, though, is they don't tell you how much 1 cup provides from the crunchy grain. They tell you 3/4 of a cup. So we're going to have to figure out what 1 cup is, which is kind of annoying. But on Tuesday, Jennifer will mix crunchy grain cereal, which we know all about here, with super grain cereal for breakfast. Super grain cereal provides 240 calories per cup. We need to know how many calories per cup, not per 3/4 of a cup, does the crunchy grain provide. Well, we know this. 3/4 of 1 cup of crunchy grain is 210 calories. So if I multiply both sides by 4/3, that'll tell me what I get per cup. 4/3 times 210, 210 divided by 3 is 70, 70 times 4 is 280. Means you get 280 calories per cup of the crunchy grain. So now I'm going to go to a systems of equations. X for crunchy, y for super. X plus 1 equals 1 because essentially we're combining crunchy grain and super grain to make 1 cup. So these are both obviously going to be fractions if they're going to add up to 1, and that's okay because we have 1 cup and it's a portion crunchy, a portion super. But I also know the total amount of calories is 270. I get 280 calories per cup of crunchy. I get 240 calories per cup of super. So this tells me total calories from crunchy, total calories from super. And now it's just the basic systems of equations. I multiply everything by negative 240 up top. In this case, the 40x gets left over. The negative 240y plus 240y gets eliminated. And when you multiply the 1 by negative 240, negative 240 and 270 is 30. When I divide by 40, my x is 3/4, and that represents crunchy. Make sure you answer what they're asking. Okay? So what plus 3/4 will give you 1/4. So my answer is B. It's funny, number 20 is probably the simplest of the 3 questions. Which of the following could be a graph of the number of calories from fat in crunchy grain cereal as a function of the number 3/4 cups of a serving? Well, we were told earlier that 3/4 of a cup gave us 50 grams of fat. Well, obviously there's 0 grams of fat when there's 0 cups. So right away, that's got to be the answer. And if you notice, it's going up at a constant rate. Going up at a constant rate. But we need to recognize there's 0 fat and 0 servings. There's no elevated or a higher number of a y-intercept. My y-intercept does have to be 0 here. Number 21 is probably the next most difficult question. It's an interesting one where you really got to understand what's going on. The graph of the exponential function h in the xy plane where y equals h of x is a y-intercept of d where d is positive. So basically, when x is 0, we know d has to be positive. That's the key here. When x equals 0, because a y-intercept is always where x equals 0. Okay? So when x equals 0, my d has to be positive. Well, if you plug 0 into the 3 choices here, d to the 0 is 1. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. That's no good. That's not a y-intercept that's positive. Here, 3 times 0 times d is 0, so that's not a y-intercept that's positive. Here, negative 0 cubed times d is 0. That's not where a y-intercept would be positive. But here, when I plug 0 in for x, 3 to the 0 is 1, and 1 times d is d. And it's a positive d, therefore that has to be the answer. What I find interesting is I think 22 and 23 are actually much simpler than 21. The weights in pounds for 15 horses in a stable were reported, and the mean, median, range, and standard deviation from the data were found. The horse with the lowest reported weight was actually 10 pounds, even lighter. So that's going to affect the average, so mean is no good. That's obviously going to affect the range. The lowest number is going to be even lower. And it also does affect our standard deviation, how far we get away from kind of where everything is. So really median, that middle number, if you notice, would not be affected. The middle number is not affected by the extreme biggest number and the extreme smallest number moving bigger or smaller. You can actually write a list of numbers out to kind of verify that. Number 23, near the end of a U.S. cable news show, the host invited viewers to respond to a poll on the show's website saying, do you support the federal policy discussed on the show? At the end of the show, the host reported 28% said yes, 70% said no. Which of the following best explains why the results unlikely represent the sentiments of a population in the United States? You always need a random sample. And anytime you're not told you have a random sample, chances are the answer is going to be the reason why you don't have a random sample. Those who responded to the poll were not a random sample. So you can't use that statistic as gospel. Here, if f of x equals fx squared minus 3, and f of x plus a equals fx squared plus 30x plus 42, what's the value of a? We're literally going to plug the x plus a in for x. And this right here, that 5x squared minus 3 should now equal what we got for f of x plus a. So whatever we get in this parenthesis, you just plug in for your x. So 5 times x minus a squared minus 3. Well, the x minus a you need to FOIL out. You can't distribute the square, so no x squared minus a squared. It's x minus a times x minus a. We FOIL that out to x squared minus 2ax plus a squared, and I distribute the 5. 5x squared minus 10ax plus 5a squared minus 3. I have a 30x here, and I just have a negative 10a in front of the x. So what do I need to multiply to negative 10 to get to 30? And that's negative 3. It's very similar to question number 16, I believe it is, the one we did at the very beginning of this video. In number 25, if the sine of x is a, okay, so the sine of x is a, so that means opposite over adjacent, opposite over hypotenuse, excuse me. I put a random m and n here, it doesn't really matter, but if the sine of x equals m over n, we could say m over n is a. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Well, if the sine of x equals a, which of the following must be true for all values of x, what we need to recognize is in a right triangle, the sine of one angle is always equal to the cosine of the other angle. If this angle's x, this angle's 90 minus x. So the cosine of 90 minus x is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. M over n are also a. So that answer is going to be the cosine of 90 minus x. Once again, in a right triangle, the sine of one angle always equals the cosine of the other. In this next one, the quadratic function above models the height above the ground in feet of a projectile x seconds after it's been launched. If y equals h of x, so y is this basically what h of x equals, is graphed on the xy plane, which of the following presents the real-life meaning of the positive x-intercept of the graph? So x-intercept is essentially when y equals 0. In the previous problem, we were trying to find the y-intercept, and that's where x equals 0. So in this case, we're looking for when y equals 0. Well, essentially, when does y equal 0? Well, when the height is equal to 0. Well, when would the height be 0? When the ball hits the ground. Therefore, the answer is D. The initial height would be the y-intercept is 10. The maximum height would always be the vertex. And the time at which the projectile reaches its maximum height would be the x-coordinate of the vertex. The maximum height would be the y-coordinate of the vertex. But where the ball hits the ground, or the projectile hits the ground, is essentially what the x-intercept would be. Number 27, the xy plane, the graph of the polynomial function crosses the x-axis at exactly 2 points. This literally comes down to if you factor something, let's say instead of x minus a, x minus b, this was x minus 2, x minus 4, what would the factors be? They'd be 2, 0, and 4, 0. You always change the sign. That's why this answer is A. You change the sign when writing a point after solving by factoring. In number 28, they're looking right here for what's the one thing you can get out of the equation that's a constant, and that's the y-intercept. The x-intercepts you'd have to factor to figure them out. The y-coordinate of the vertex, you'd have to find the vertex first. The x-coordinate of the vertex, or the x-intercept of the line of symmetry, you'd still have to find the vertex. And it's not given right in the equation, but right here, if you plug 0 in for x squared, the 2 is literally that y-intercept is given in the equation. Number 29, the big key here is to realize slope is always over 1 unless it's told to you otherwise. You don't even have to worry about the graph. A line of best fit is shown in the equation y equals 0.096x minus 0.488. What does the line of best fit predict of the increase in the minimum wage over 70 years? Literally, the slope is over 1. So every year it's going to go up 0.096. And there's your answer. The slope never represents over 10 years unless you put it over 10 years. That's why the answer is A, every year. And sorry about that. So the last one, we have a line of best fit again. And what we need to recognize is right here is not the y-intercept. We can do this all off the y-intercept. This is 10. So if I keep drawing this line down, 0 is going to be somewhere over here.
So therefore, the only possible answer is 84. Trying to get it off 33, you're going to struggle. So it's really just off 84, and my answer is